So welcome everyone to the OCRE Earth Observation Services Funding for Research launch. My name is Kirsty McDonald. I'm from Trust IT and I'll be moderating today's session. We'll give it just a couple of more minutes for a few more attendees. Perhaps 2 more minutes and then we'll begin. In the meantime, let me introduce our panel and our agenda for today. So we'll kick off today's session with some words from OCRE Project Director David Haynes, who will offer us an introduction into OCRE in general. After which we'll hear from Jose Manuel Delgado from RIA and Emmanuel Pijo from ERSC, who will tell us a little bit about the sort of observation services researchers can expect to be available. Finally, we'll hear from Jan Meyer from Uninet, who will take us through the adoption process and give us a little bit more information about that as well. If you have any questions at all, please raise your hand during the presentations, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So please just raise your hand or let us know in the chat that you have a question.
Right, Kirsty, can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody, good afternoon, and thank you for your interest in the OCRE project. I'm Dave Haynes. I am the project director on OCRE, and I'm also work for Géant and focus on the cloud and digital services portfolio. Just to talk a little bit about the OCRE ambitions, and I only have 5 minutes today, and I can talk for a really long time on this, but the ambitions the European Commission has is to provide researchers with access to commercial cloud and digital services. And this, the project is doing by means of procurements for both cloud services and for Earth observation services. Once the procurement structures are in place and researchers are able to easily consume these services, OCRE intends to drive the adoption of these services in a series of funding waves. So kind of sponsoring these services that are available through our frameworks and helping the research community get going with these services. What we're looking to do is to develop some great case studies so that we can further evangelize the benefits of using these digital services within the broader EOSC, European Open Science Cloud community. So why do we want to do this? Well, we want to grow the emerging Earth observation digital solutions. There are some really, really interesting use cases already on how Earth observation assists research across many disciplines. And I think looking for more and more of these case studies is really ultimately what we want to do. And we want to promote Earth observation services across all disciplines. We want to stimulate the European digital economy by encouraging small and medium enterprises who are consuming Copernicus data and adding value in terms of analytics, in terms of renderings, in terms of applying algorithms, providing some more intelligence to this data. We're looking to actually stimulate the developers of those solutions to join our procurements and focus on the real specific requirements of the research community. We hope to promote agility in local research activities, certainly through commodity cloud services, and to harness the analytics platforms, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all the kind of platform as a service offerings that the hyperscale cloud platforms offer, to support collaboration, to drive the broader EOSC ambitions. I mentioned the European Open Science Cloud, ideas on open research, driving the real sustainability of fair data, reusable data that can be consumed by researchers beyond your projects. And then I mentioned stimulating these small and medium enterprise developments. And then, as I said, provide for the acquisition and service delivery of these services. What are the key benefits? Well, all of the cloud and digital services that we make available through our procurement frameworks will be validated in terms of meeting the community's requirements, meeting data privacy standards, GDPR compliance, contractual billing integration, technical support, and then special pricing focused on the research community. We will integrate these with the services that will be made available through the European Open Science Cloud, the funded e-infrastructures. We'll make them available by means of ready-to-use agreements so that the research institutes do not need to run their own tenders, their own procurements. And we will encourage these researchers yourselves to apply for adoption funding to make so these services can be made available to your projects and drive the agility and outcomes that we believe these services do drive. And then we have this discipline-focused proof of concept that is focused on Earth observations. We will have a dynamic procurement system in place that will be published imminently. We're working closely with the European Commission, and they authorize all of our procurement publications. And the supply registration will be based on requirements that these open calls for funding identify, and we will kind of drive those into the market to see what response we can get and how we can stimulate solutions to your requirements. In a nutshell, the impact targets for the Earth observation adoption funding, we are looking for projects that intend on consuming Earth observation services to accelerate their research outcomes. We're looking for projects that are able to demonstrate the impact of these services in terms of their outputs and agility, that are not currently using these tools at scale, that provide significant relevance in terms of your research disciplines, that form part of the broader European research community, and that hope to support further research and collaboration through your efforts. We will have the procurements in place at year end, so we will be able to supply these services, procure on your behalf at year end or early in 2021. And we'd actually appeal to all researchers to really try and understand what we mean by fair data, by making your data reusable. It is potentially a complicated process that does require the standardization of metadata, but we do think it will make research in Europe sustainable moving forward. The first call is published today, the first open call for funding for Earth observation services. We are looking at submissions by individual institutes that have projects that would benefit greatly by consuming these services, and these will be 100% funded by the OCRE project. We're also looking for project submissions that have been referred by research agencies, by e-infrastructures, by the National Research and Education networks, where these agencies and organizations are aware that research is taking place and could benefit by being 50% co-funded for these services. Then we're certainly looking for those projects to be submitted at all. We're looking to meet the impact targets that we discussed on the previous slide. We want to reach out broadly in terms of reach, discipline, and location. And we're seeing more and more use cases where Earth observation services are really influencing decision-making on urbanization, for example, smart cities, how to better deliver resources. Obviously, environmental studies and research benefit hugely from consuming this data, but right across all research disciplines, we're actually seeing use cases where Earth observation data makes a big impact to the research outputs. We work closely with an external advisory board that OCRE assembled. So there is transparency in terms of the decisions we make, the projects we fund. We socialize these opportunities across all the channels available to the project. And this call, being our first call, will provide precedent for future calls. So anything we learn from interacting with yourselves within the research community will help us evolve the way these calls work, take place, and drive this funding. So that is all from me. Thank you. Please refer any questions to funding@ocreproject.eu, kind of beyond this call. We would happily answer your questions. And I'll pass you back to Kirsty.
Thank you, David. I'll now pass the floor to Jose Manuel Delgado Blasco from REA. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share the screen. So, welcome everybody. My name, as Christy says, Jose Manuel Delgado Blasco. I work for REA Group, and I'm a translation expert. So I want to show you what we have been carrying out already in the project. So in the first phase, we already did the Earth observation requirements gathering, in which we got a participation in 19 European countries that were covering all the domains and subdomains, the research they were specified by the Earth taxonomy, that this recently had changed, but still we had all those covered. So that means that there are quite good wide range of users and applications that are expected to be used. So yeah, then from this requirement gathering, we have identified, let's say, 6 technical capabilities. One is the data processing services. Another one, the user algorithm hosting, the data analytics, the value-added products or interactive developments, and all of them could have an additional capability of data sharing and publishing of the results or the algorithms or the value-added products or so on. So yeah, this is kind of the categories we could group all the requests that we got from the requirements. So just to put some examples of the potential customer scenario. So the first scenario is like the traditional scenario we have, right? We have the research or the customer that is there expecting the satellite to get new data. So then the researcher, the customer, sends the request to the provider, which has a list of in-house services. And then once the result is done, so the provider sends to the researcher or to the customer in this side. So now we have also scenario 2, that there is kind of a new generation of basic Earth observation researcher that implies a little bit more knowledge of the Earth observation than the scenario 1. So again, we have here the satellite that passes over the Earth, acquires data, then the customer connects to the provider's processing platform. And there is a list of available online services in which is the customer, which is able to select the services, select the data, produce the results, make the analysis, and so on. So this is kind of what is expected in the scenario 2, where the user is using a setup of already available services in the platform. Then in the scenario 3, we call it a new generation expert Earth observation researcher, which is kind of slightly different from the scenario 2 in the fact that we have again the satellite passing over the Earth, the researcher connects to the provider's processing platform, but it's there when the researcher developed their own algorithm in an interactive way. So they have some online capabilities that allows to develop, test, and also maybe share again the algorithm and to use the algorithm that is there provided, or even to download it from themselves. So then these are different kind of services in this platform, but yeah, all of them, they have again a list of potential services that is not exhaustive, obviously. So yes, this is where the 3 scenarios we identified, trying to cover all the wide of service providers and also applications that are able to. So again, as Dave said, you have any question, you can send it to that email or even to my email or my colleague that we are working in this part. So thank you very much. And again, we can also answer the questions at the end of the session. So I give back to Kirsty. Yes, give me a sec.
Thank you, Jose Manuel. I now pass the floor to Emmanuel Pajot from ERSC. Thank you.
Manuel, you are muted.
Yes, it is so. Thank you. So I am Emmanuel Pajot. I am the Secretary General of the European Association of Remote Sensing Company, ERSC, a trade association representing the European Earth observation downstream industry with 127 members from 25 countries in Europe. Our members are commercial operators of Earth observation satellites, resellers of data, value-adding companies, geospatial information supplier, consultancy, and software or system providers. I'm really delighted to be with you today. It is great to see such a project moving forward, as OCRE is about creating links between communities, you, researchers, and our members, for example, which is a key pillar of ERSC. OCRE remembers me a discussion 20 years ago when, with my teacher, when I was at the university, they say that the services from the private sector were available but far too much expensive. So really this project is about opportunities for researchers to have access to this Earth observation service and product. And I hope that numerous researchers who are not familiar currently with Earth observation will use this opportunity to test and integrate Earth observation in their research. And it's although an opportunity to develop links, and not only commercial links, with researchers, to develop new services, to develop new ideas based on Earth observation layers of informations. So it is really an opportunity to develop European Earth observation capabilities. I guess most of you are today at least somehow familiar with Earth observation, if not already expert. You already have potentially developed your process to identify the suitable data, to acquire and process this data. In this short presentation, I will present a really limited number of potential services. This may not sometimes highlight services linked to your area of research, but what I will offer you is the opportunity to maybe identify a new approach to explore new examples of using Earth observation. And as I said before by José Manuel, I will focus on the value-added products. So thanks to all the research work done over the last decade, Earth observation is now an operational tool used in numerous thematic areas. ERSC has developed a taxonomy of Earth observation services composed of two views, thematic and market. And the thematic view, which is the one as displayed now, is the one specialists, you researchers, but also service providers have. This is a really good start. We define 6 main thematic domains. So you have the atmosphere and climate, disaster and geohazard, land, built environment, marine and maritime. And each of them are divided into in total 32 segments. And for each of these segments, we identified Earth observation services and connected them to at least one of these 87 Earth observation services we described. And this taxonomy you can have access to, which is available on EOWiki. I will introduce later. This taxonomy is used really to structure the information in our different platform. And this taxonomy has been used for the user requirement gathering of OCRE. So these are the 6 domains, the 32 thematic, and the 87 EO services, which can be available on the web. OCRE is about the delivery of services. Over the last few years, the Earth observation downstream companies have significantly changed their approach, their process. They moved from a bespoke approach when a product was customized for a specific customer to a more semi or fully automated production. And this huge investment made by companies ensure now the delivery of standardized layers of information to be easily integrated by users. The first place to illustrate this trend is EOMOL. URL is eomol.eu. It is a marketplace dedicated to the promotion of online services. From the main page, you can have access to already a significant amount of information, case studies, description of services, description of companies. But you will also find a faster way to access this. This is what we call galleries. If you click on galleries, you can have access to the taxonomy, and then you can explore in 2 clicks what are the services which are available. And for example, the first set is about land and land cover analysis. This service produces maps based on Earth observation data and handles the application of machine learning algorithms for land surface classifications. You can integrate your own samples if you want, or you can use default options. Another one is about this 5D lists. So this service introduced a 5D modeling pipeline that help to create 3D models of an urban area in various time instances and at various level of details, and they are enriched with cadastral and other spatial data. Solar panel system, for example, the service is available in the Netherlands. Currently, it detects solar panels and estimates the power output of each of this project. Landslide and ground movement. This service is using synthetic aperture radar data and perform interferometric treatments in order to measure sub-centimetric movement of reference point in the ground. This is really useful to detect landslides, but also to detect very slow motions, for example, in the urban areas. And you can, through all these galleries, have access to different services. Up to you to explore this. For example, you can have access to other services to monitor trees. This service informs about the different status of the different tree species in surroundings, and it's really accurate for municipalities. Real estate can be tackled. Renovatio, for example, is a data-driven decision support system for real estate sector. It really helps to collect different kind of information from Earth observation and non-Earth observation sources in order to better estimate the risk in project. Another one is about the identification of the change in the agriculture parcels, which are available. And we can continue like this with a lot of different projects and products available. For example, the snow monitoring one is provided at different resolution from 500 meters for global coverage up to 20 meters resolutions, and a very high resolution even of snow depth can be obtained in specific areas in Switzerland, Rocky Mountains, Sierra Nevada. But all these algorithms could be further extended to other regions. Another one, fire maps, is based on data from Sentinel fleet, but also from NASA and EUMETSAT, as well as weather and climate data from different providers. It can provide access to time series of over 10 years for fire basement assessment, and it is coupling with Earth observation and weather data that provide online modeling of fire behavior and fire risk. It's really a short example. And for each of these services, you have a product description and some technical specification available each time. This is just EOMOL. You can have other access, other platforms which are owned and used by ERSC to promote capabilities. This is EOWiki, when you can have access to the taxonomy I displayed previously. If you click on the success story, you will have access to a lot of different examples of case studies, success stories we gather from different projects or provided by companies in order to illustrate how Earth observation data is used currently. And you can explore through the thematic approach or through the SDG approach we provided. So you have a wealth of examples actually on the different platforms from ERSC, but also from other. You have EO Science for Society, which can help you to really understand what is available. You have the body of knowledge from EO for Geo. RUS is also a really good source of information. And for more commercial applications, again, EO Pages, which is a solution provided by ERSC. So I'm really happy. It is just a really short example of what you can have access to, and please use it and provide your feedback. We'll be really happy to help you. You are the ambassador of this project. Share this information with your colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'll now pass the floor to Jan, who will wrap up our session for today.
Thank you, Kirsty. And as I was sharing my screen, and I have two screens here, all of a sudden my unmute button moved somewhere else. So that was rather inconvenient. Thanks to Ersk for the introduction into the services that you could be requesting adoption funding for. So I'll quickly take you through the logistics of the adoption funding call. So just a quick recap. So OCRE will establish these procurement vehicles, right, for commercial infrastructure cloud and for commercial Earth observation platform services, and then target the research community to stimulate the adoption of these services. And Dave has already mentioned it. For the commercial Earth observation platform services, we're using a dynamic purchasing system. And as I replied in the chat, the beauty of a dynamic purchasing system is that you have the ability to add suppliers all the time, right? So basically, you have the ability to add whatever supplier comes along, and it's a pretty small process to do. And then up to the point where you actually are going to run a so-called DPS tender, that's the point where you're really asking all the suppliers in that dynamic purchasing system, right, here's the service that I really want to have. These are my functional requirements. Up to that point, any supplier can come in. And then once that tender is done, new suppliers can be added again. So that means that in the second adoption call for Earth observation services, we'll have more suppliers in that DPS. The downside is that at this moment, we can't point you to an OCRE list of available suppliers because it doesn't exist yet. And that's why we had Ersk here today to explain to you, right? So what's the possible realm of possible service providers that you could imagine, right? So to stimulate that adoption, we have 3 waves available. And for Earth observation, we're now looking at wave 2 and wave 3. In which we have 1.5 million for research projects at individual institutions and 2.25 for 50% co-funding for research projects at groups of institutions represented by, referred by a research support organization. It's a bit of a vague definition. I'll have a couple of examples later on. Important dates for this particular call and future call planning. So this call opens basically today. The application deadline is set on Monday, the 30th of November. And then we're gonna need some time to evaluate the proposals. The award announcement I expect latest to be on at the end of January. I hope a bit earlier, but I'm dependent on the external advisory board that provides oversight of the awards, and I can't control exactly when these 10 busy people can meet. So if you look into the future, you can see that we'll have a new call early next year and a call before summer holidays. We're synchronizing the Earth observation and the cloud services calls that are coming up next year. We will try to pull these calls forward. So we had to experiment a bit in setting up the whole adoption funding mechanism. But now that that's in place, we've received some clear signals from the Commission that it would be beneficial if we have a bit of an earlier timeline on the delivery of results of the adoption funding. So we're going to try and do that. So just quickly through the process. So the applicant submits a project proposal. OCRE does the evaluation. What we then do to ensure that we have a balanced, fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory funding allocation, we have an external advisory board that reviews our intended awards. On that link, and the slides will be available afterwards, you can see the composition of that board. For the awarded contracts, OCRE then engages in a contracting phase. That will be an MOU. Together with the awarded project, we'll then establish the detailed requirements, the functional specifications for the services to procure. OCRE then conducts the dynamic purchasing system tender for those awarded projects, and that the reason why we have to do has something to do with the mechanics of a DPS that has to be all digital and all that. So that's the way that that's currently done. The project uses the procured services, and somewhere in that service use, the project will work with us on the creation of the showcase that we're interested in. And that'll take the form of something like, the showcase will take the form of something like a podcast, an interview, a written document. We're not entirely sure that, but something in that direction where OCRE does the actual work of creating that showcase, but naturally we require your input on that. So this is what I was referring to earlier on, right? So all the way up to the point where the DPS tender is executed, up to that point, new suppliers can enter that dynamic purchasing system. So that means that it would be quite logical to have kind of like a market engagement at the point where you have these detailed requirements, right? To ensure that there are suppliers that you can choose from the DPS. Our strategy is pretty straightforward. We're aiming for bigger research relevant projects that really show how OCRE's portfolio of services can help to achieve great research outcomes. And great research outcomes can be many different things. They could be new outcomes that are enabled by the services. It could mean that you're basically improving your execution, your productivity. It could be a matter of less time, less money, higher quality. It could be an impact amplifier, right? Allowing small groups to do larger undertakings that before were beholden to larger organizations. That's a possibility. With the 50% co-funding, we're imagining that the OCRE funding would allow existing projects that are already planning to do something like this to do more of what they're doing. So an example could be you're looking at a project that analyzes a chunk of Europe, and that's what you have budget for. With the OCRE funding, you could then do a bigger chunk of Europe. And depending on your project, that may or may not be interesting. And ultimately what we're after then is inspiring showcases, case studies that show other researchers how they can use services like these in their research, right? Who's eligible and what can the OCRE funding be used for? In principle, all member institutions of the national research and educational networks in the green countries are eligible for OCRE funding. And the funding is for, in this call, purchases from the Earth Observation Services Dynamic Purchasing System, consulting services in support of using these services, and that could be onboarding or assisting with architecting service use or something very Earth observation specific that I probably don't know about, but that might be part of that consulting services portfolio of that supplier. They can also be used for infrastructure as a service purchases in support of using these Earth observation services. But again, the caveat, these IAS services have to come off the OCRE portfolio of services, and that portfolio will be known at the end of the year. What I can safely say is that you can safely assume that the big hyperscaling platforms will be a part of that. But that's all I can say at the moment. What is not covered by the OCRE funding is your project's person hours that you have to have your own budget for. What we want to know, your research project description, and so explain why your project is worthwhile and capable of becoming a showcase for others. You could say, sell us your project. You could also say we're looking for a bit projects that appeal to people, but that's a bit hard to describe. And explain, please, how it benefits from a look on the Earth from the sky. And it could be any research field. It could be health, it could be urbanization, it could be many different things. Second thing we want to know is how will Earth observation services based on Copernicus data support your project activities and improve your research outcomes? And that's the bit where we're really going to look at. So what services do you intend to use in functional terms? But feel free to use any brand names as examples, and your ability to execute and use the resources in a short time. So we have two types of funding available. I've mentioned that before. The 100% funding for individual institutes, research projects, and this could be collaborations as long as they're fronted by a single institute, right? That's what we're after. And we've defined a couple of funding tiers. However, should your proposal fall outside of these tiers, If you have a great idea, then please do apply, because we have some leeway in how to deal with the tiers. And then the 50% co-funding. Funding tiers are the same as the 100%, but we've added one, basically 100 to 250K. And this is where we're looking for projects, institutional research projects, again, could be a collaboration of multiple institutions, referred to or supported by a national or multinational research support agency. And examples, that could be ESFRIs or ERICs, it could be national research and educational networks, e-infrastructure providers, larger European or national research agencies. So there are many organizations that we could consider to be adoption amplifiers that we imagine that would somehow be involved in that. But there's probably too many of these constructs available in the European and national space to be able to list them all. Our evaluation priorities will look primarily at the showcase effect of your research and the impact of the OCRE services on your research. Naturally, we'll look at your ability to use these services and achieve impact on your research in a relatively short time, where we're talking about months, not years, your ability to execute, and your eligibility. Naturally. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now in the Q&A, or if you want to ask them later, you can send them to the funding@ocreproject.eu email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you to all of the panelists. We now have a number of questions, but before we go on to them, I'd just like to let everyone know that the slides and video will be available on the OCRE website from the end of today for everyone to refer to. Okay, so let's start the Q&A session. We have about 20 minutes left. So we have a question from, and my apologies if I mispronounce anybody's names. We have a question from Raymond Onk from Amsterdam. I'll direct this question to David. He's asking, can OCRE funding be used for non-commercial clouds?
Can OCRE funding be used for non-commercial clouds? Well,
Exactly.
OCRE funding will be made available through the commercial frameworks that the OCRE project has put in place. And the OCRE project will procure, and GÉANT, as a centralized procuring authority for OCRE, will procure on behalf of the research projects. So these would need to be commercial cloud services that have responded to and listed on the OCRE procurement frameworks.
Okay, and now we have a question from Itai Herman. Jan, is precision agriculture considered a priority at all?
I answered it in the chat, I believe. At the moment, we don't have any such prioritization. So any discipline goes.
But I think the point that I made in that every subsequent call for funding will set a precedent for the call before. If we do get a lot of response from one specific area or discipline in the first call, we will actually kind of refocus the second call on other areas of discipline and will hopefully, cast a wide net in terms of discipline.
We have a question from Guido Limoine. Perhaps, David, you can answer. How's Copernicus DS related to OCRE? Okay,
so the DS platforms are actually infrastructure that the infrastructure that is used to capture and store the Copernicus data that comes down from the Sentinel program. And the suppliers of services that we're looking to list on the DPS would be SMEs that have created these add-on products and that are potentially consuming the Copernicus data off of the DS platforms. But the DS platforms in their own right are a infrastructure as a service platform that could well have responded to the OCRE cloud tender.
Okay, So we have a question from Juan Suarez, and he's asking, are we only looking at satellite data or any other EO data? Jan, perhaps you can answer that one?
Let me think. I think we answered that in the chat, didn't we? So we're saying Earth observation data based on Copernicus data, I believe. That's the current formulation that we're using. So somehow we'd like to see the use of Copernicus data in all of this.
Okay, and then another question from Guido. He's asking, do OCRE proposals have to address applications that are not in the ERSC portfolio? Perhaps Emmanuel, you'd like to answer that one.
Yes, absolutely. The services could be provided by a non-ERSC member. There is no limitation at all. It is completely open. We just use some ERSC platform in order to promote what kind of services could be available, but there is no limitation.
Okay, great. And then we have a number of questions related to non-European entries and whether UK-based entries are still eligible after Brexit. Jan?
Yeah, I saw them. So unless and until we hear otherwise from the European Commission, UK-based entities are eligible. There's no problem with that. Regarding non-European entities, as long as you're a member of the National Research and Educational Network in one of the green countries that I showed earlier, then you're eligible, then you're good. So it's basically EU plus the associated countries that are part of Horizon 2020, minus those countries that particularly chose to be not part of this. That's what it boils down to. And then I think we covered those questions, right?
Yeah, I think we've covered all questions so far. If anybody else has any further questions, please do add it to the Q&A or to the chat. I'm just checking the Q&A now, and we have an anonymous question. Are SMEs funded as well? To what percentage? And is it always within a research institute?
So the beneficiaries of the OCRE procurements are research institutes that are within the membership of a local national research and education network. So we cannot procure on behalf of an SME. We can only procure on behalf of these eligible institutes. So we will be providing funded services for these institutes.
Okay, great. And Eves asks, can the funding be used for buying high-resolution INSAR images, e.g. TerraSAR X?
I imagine that if they would be provided through one of the service providers that are part of this dynamic purchasing system, then that could possibly be an option. You do hear how much possibly and maybes I insert into here. But that sounds like a good route, one that would work.
Emmanuel might be able to expand on that based on the services that he's come across and the suppliers of these services. Emmanuel?
Yes.
So the question was quite specifically on a certain type of service or image.
Yeah.
And just let me get the...
I think there is no limitation actually on the data as soon as it is provided by an eligible company or through the platform which is eligible as well.
Yeah.
So it could be all high resolution or low resolution, optic or SAR or other kind of data.
Okay, Nuno Grosso is asking, until when can an EO service provider apply to be a part of the DPS?
So if you're looking for a date, so let me think. We said that the call closes on the 30th of November. and the awards would be known latest end of January. So after the awards, that's when we sit down with the project to define the functional requirements that we will use to do the actual procurement. So the actual procurement, I assume, would take place in February. So that means that as an Earth observation provider, you'd have at least until, say, mid to end January, I would say mid, to become part of the DPS. And if you're joining later than that, then you do run the risk that you wouldn't be able to reply to that first tender. Yeah.
Okay, and Raymond Onk has another question. Will we know which services will be available before anything needs to be submitted?
So I think in principle, yes, because the services available, basically any service available that is like an Earth observation service can become a part of the DPS. Obviously, this is up to the service provider to do so, but there's no functional limitation other than that, well, you have to do something with Earth observation data.
Okay, that's great. So I think we don't have any more questions. So thank you very much, everyone, for your presentations. Just to reiterate, the presentations will be available on the website, which is OCRE-project.eu, as will this video, in case you have any questions at all. Also, feel free to email us as well, but all of the information will be available on the website. Okay, great.
I think a question just popped in.
Yes.
From Itai Huiman. What is the funding for? Right. So the funding is for using Earth observation platform services. That's how I know them. So these are services that somehow use Copernicus data and or other Earth observation data, and then add some value on top of that that make it easier for a researcher to use that data. And what OCRE can be funding is the bill that you would get from a service provider like that for the use of those services. We can also be funding professional support services that are related to the use of the Earth observation services. So this could be onboarding, it could be architecting. And if you would need infrastructure as a service from Google or Amazon or wherever to support your use of the Earth observation services, that can also be considered funded by OCRE. What we cannot fund is your own person hours on a project. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, we have a question from Rolf Becker in the Q&A. Can you please comment on the fair data handling?
Dave, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So one of what's really important to the European Open Science Cloud, EOSC, is to make research data, European research data, available for future research. And there are a number of different ways of doing this. So from an OCRE perspective, we would look at trying to identify suppliers that would provide some level of sustainable hosting for that data. But in order for that data to be reusable, you need the researcher themselves needs to have stepped through a certain amount of metadata standardization so that the data is meaningful. We are looking at platforms that can provide for the hosting of fair data, the long-term hosting of fair data. We're looking at solutions that include possibly cold storage, which means it would be on a large cloud platform, but maybe not immediately available. So we are looking at fair data in terms of storage and sustainable storage. But beyond that, that's kind of as far as our remit goes.
Okay, we've got a number of new questions in the chat. So Itai Herman has another question. If I do analysis myself, is OCRE relevant for me?
So that really depends on you. I mean, if you are not consuming any kind of add-on service, you possibly could be consuming it. What OCRE is trying to stimulate in terms of Earth observation services is where somebody like yourself is doing the analysis of the satellite data and potentially providing that analysis as an add-on solution that another researcher can consume. So if you have no requirement for any kind of add-on service, then possibly not, but it's possibly something you can consider, or you can consider possibly trying to stimulate the market in whatever analysis you do to provide add-on value to other researchers.
Emmanuel, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you're the specialist in this field.
We could discuss a lot about this. For sure, if you are an Earth observation expert, maybe you can do a lot alone. But thanks to OCRE, you can access, for example, to this maybe higher resolution data in order to try or what would be the consequence of these new layers. If you are not an Earth observation expert, then it can be really a great opportunity to investigate how Earth observation layers could provide added value for your science and your research, and to develop new views, new approach. So I think everybody can benefit. Each of the beauty of this project is that you have a lot of liberty, freedom to identify what could really impact your research. So I think everybody can find room for OCRE in his research.
Okay, David, we've got another question about DS. Is DS considered a service that can become a part of the DPS?
So the DS provide a number of services, and they provide services that certainly could become part of the DPS. They also provide services that are focused more on IAS. So you could well find the DS platforms both on the OCRE IAS framework and specialist services from the DS available on the DPS. And we do anticipate that the DS will in fact respond to the DPS.
Okay, great. We've got lots of questions coming in now. We've only got another 7 minutes. So let's see, what do we have? Could you advise where we can find information about how to publish services on the DPS?
Yeah. Dave, do you know if we have any form available already where potential suppliers can register their interest?
So I would suggest you kind of watch the OCRE website, but when we publish the DPS, the publication will be announced on TED. It will also be distributed, the publication will be distributed through ERSC, through the broader Earth observation community, through the REA group, through the OCRE project. Certainly, if you want to go onto the OCRE project, I think you can register interest in the project, and you will find yourself on a mailing list that will be notified once the DPS is published, which is imminent. As I said, we are just waiting for the European Commission's procurement experts to verify that our documentation on the DPS is correct. And we anticipate that coming through in the next week or 10 days.
Yeah, and your best bet to know exactly when it's released is could be to just have a permanent query on the TED, the Tender Europe daily. Yeah.
Okay, just to answer a quick question that just popped up. Yes, the webinar is being recorded at the moment and will be available on the OCRE website and the OCRE YouTube channel from later today. Okay, so another question from Antoine. Will the delivery of service be one shot, i.e. once for a set of added value products, or could this be a regular service, e.g. operational delivery every 12 days of NRT products? Jan.
We would hope that the adoption funding clearly shows to researchers that there is great added value for them in using these services, and that this turns into a regular service use. Whether or not that's going to materialize, well, that's why we're running this project.
Okay, and we have another question from Rolf in the Q&A. Could we use the funded services, e.g. cloud storage, to provide an open access data warehouse filled with our own data, e.g. from airborne instruments, which could be used together with already available Copernicus data? What would happen to that data?
Data repository after funding. Okay, so that is a really interesting question. Rolf, is my understanding right that you would be a supplier of add-on services and you would be wanting to consume commodity cloud services for hosting your solution? Is my understanding of the question correct?
Rolf, perhaps you can let us know in the chat.
Yeah, in the, sorry. I think that's what you're asking. Okay, well maybe, and we are doing research with our own data. Okay, so as researchers, you can apply for both cloud services, so both commodity IaaS services, and for specialist Earth observation services through this call. The two would need to coexist. So you would be needing to consume Earth observation services because we are wanting to stimulate this market. There's currently a cloud call open where you could actually put your project forward, a proposal forward for the consumption of commodity cloud services. And that is open, that has been running since the 15th of September. It closes at the end of October, but there is still an opportunity if you visit the OCRE website to actually put a proposal in for the consumption of cloud services.
Yeah. And I think in general, it's pretty safe to say that, look, you're the ones that propose a project, you're the ones that are applying and then propose to use services in a certain way. So if part of your proposal is that, look, we'd like to have funding for the sustained availability of this combination of data for a period of 2 years, and this is what that's going to cost roughly, then that is an integral part of your proposal. And we'll just evaluate it as we evaluate other proposals.
Okay, well, I think that's all of our questions for today. And yeah, we're just about out of time. So thank you once again to all of our panelists, and thank you to our attendees as well. I think we had over 110 at the peak, so that's great to know. As we've mentioned, all of the information will be available on the OCRE website from today. So we look forward to hearing from you.